Hey adventurers, so this is going to be a different video than I normally do. I've done a couple things similar and I have more planned, but this is not one that I had initially planned to do anytime soon. But I was requested to do, I guess I should tell you what it is. This is going to be a shelf tour of my Arthurian literature, so an Arthurian shelf tour. Basically, these are the books that I own that are on my shelves physically that are Arthurian related in some way, shape, or form. That are specifically Arthurian related, meaning they in the Arthurian world, the world of King Arthur. So, Into the Heartwild, channel Into the Heartwild, commented and asked if I'd ever done one of these videos, and if not, would I do it? And so I was like, yeah, that's a great idea, I should do that one, and it's something that I need to do anyways. I don't have a ton of Arthurian literature at the moment. I've slowly been building up my collection for sure, but there's a lot more that I don't have yet, and I'm excited to continue getting it. I love Arthurian literature. It's probably, the Arthurian mythos is probably my favorite mythos. I really like Greek and Roman mythology as well, but I think Arthurian is probably my favorite. And yeah, there's a whole lot of whether or not Arthur was real, or there was a character, a real Arthur type character or anything like that. That's a discussion for another time. For this video specifically, I'm just going to go through the books that I physically own that are on my shelves that are Arthurian literature in some way, shape, or form. So the first one that I have, try not to knock the pile over, is the Arthurian Encyclopedia. This one, who's it? Norris J. Lacey is the editor, and associate editors Jeffrey Ash, Sandra Ness-Ely, Marianne E. Kellink, Raymond H. Thompson are the associate editors. I probably butchered some of those names, but this is just, it's an Arthurian encyclopedia. It's from the 80s, 84 I want to say, but it was $4, $4.50, and the likelihood of me using something like this in the future, 86 I guess, the likelihood of me using something like this is very high, just as reference material to go find out a little bit more about a character or a person or a location or sigil, heraldry, or something like that. There's a whole bunch in this book it's just a reference material for me, or for somebody else who might be writing Arthurian literature that I know or something like that. So it's just reference material. It's not reading, at least I wouldn't sit and read it cover to cover, but I am happy and excited to have this because it will probably get used. The next one that I have, and this was sent to me by my friend Christopher Navo, is Bernard Cornwell's The Winter King. This is the first book in his trilogy, Warlord Chronicles, book 1. So I think there's 3 books in this series, and I'm excited to read them because I love Arthurian literature and I've heard that these are fantastic. So I'm excited to read this one eventually when I get it. It's nice. It's a nice floppy trade paperback book too. That's always nice. But yeah, I don't know when I'll get to this one, but I want to at some point. Continuing on, so I have Gurzil by I Anonymous. This is the book 1 in the Wars of Wrath series. I actually have a paperback arc and then the official release hardback version. This is a fun book. This is The Wars of Wrath is a series by I Anonymous where it's historical fiction, or it's historical fantasy. So it's historical events looked at through the lens of fantasy, essentially, and the story is told very fantasy-like. Gurzil specifically, so Gurzil's the dragon, the main villain of the entire series type thing, I think. I don't know, we're only 2 books, I've only read 2 books so far, but I think Gurzil's like the main villain. But then one of the main heroes of this series is George Bertilac, who is basically going to, as far as I understand, become the character known as George the Dragon Slayer in Catholic mythology, I think is what it is. But that's kind of who this George is going to be. So George Bertilac, but also because he's Bertilac, that is the name of the Green Knight. Sir Bertilac is the Green Knight from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight tale. So that's cool. That's how that all ties in. I've also read the second book in the series, which is Badon Hill, which is another very important event to Arthurian literature. Basically, the account of Mount Badon is one of the only places that a character named Arthur is mentioned in anything. So yeah, it's kind of important. So that's his version of the retelling of the Battle of Mount Badon, I believe it was. I believe is what it's called. And then book 3, which I don't remember what it's called. It's not out yet, but I'm excited to read that one once it does come out. The next one I have is Andre Norton's Merlin's Mirror, which is, I don't know anything about this book other than that it's a vintage fiction, vintage book here, and I don't know anything about Andre Norton. I don't know anything about this book or the series or anything like that, but it's Merlin's Mirror, clearly Arthurian, but I believe it's kind of science fiction. In this great new science fiction novel, Andre Norton brings to life the legendary King Arthur and the Wizard Merlin in the light of modern knowledge of a lost period of history and today's understanding of science and interplanetary communication. So, from what I understand, it's like a science fiction novel about the Arthurian mythology, somewhat, maybe futuristic a little bit. I don't know because I haven't read it yet, but it's interesting. I like Arthurian stuff, so I picked it up because it was super cheap again. Next one I have very similar is Camelot in Orbit, which is by Arthur H. Landis, and this is one where, again, it was super cheap when I got it, and I don't know anything about it other than it seems like it's basically an Arthurian retelling on a different planet type thing. Yeah, I don't know anything about it other than that. So another science fiction retelling of the Arthurian story set on another planet, somehow also has the same something as a mythos very similar to Arthurian mythos. So yeah, then I have books 1 and book 4 in the Pendragon Cycle by Stephen R. Lawhead. Not the same edition, unfortunately, but that's alright. I'll eventually get them all in the same edition once I have all 5 of them and have read them. But so I have Taliesin, which is book 1, and Pendragon which is book 4. This is a series that I've seen around and I've heard about for years, and I never really knew anything about it or read it or anything like that. But then it was announced that several months ago, beginning of this year or earlier, that Pendragon, that the Daily Wire had picked up the rights to adapt this series. That's what I'm trying to say, and that's exciting. I'm all for more Arthurian adaptations, especially if they're going to be good and not be agenda driven, which is the hope with that there. So I mean, basically the last Arthurian show that I watched was Merlin, which I love Merlin, and then the last Arthurian movie that I watched was King Arthur Legend of the Sword, which is also super fun, but it's not a good adaptation of the Arthurian mythos at all, but it's a really fun movie. So anyways, I'm hoping for another great fantasy TV series about the Arthurian legend, and I do want to read these books soon. That's one of the goals, is to finish reading, or is to read Taliesin before the end of it. Then I have the Arthurian Romances by Chrétien de Troyes. This is a very important piece of Arthurian literature because this is like the introduction of Lancelot. Chrétien de Troyes, I believe, created the character of Lancelot, and that's kind of very important moment for Arthurian history. There's also a whole bunch of other stories. What are all the ones in here? Eric and Enide, I don't know, Enide, I don't know, Cleges, don't know that, Lancelot, and then Yvain and Percival. So a whole bunch of characters. Percival, obviously Percival, is a very important character, and one of the characters that I really like that never gets enough notice, never is the main character of a story or anything like that, and so I want to see more of him because I like Percival as well. Continuing on, this is Culhwch and Olwen, which is a old Welsh tale. This is I believe a modern English translation. Obviously it's an English translation, but I don't remember if it is, well, obviously if it's a Welsh tale, it's translated from Welsh, but it's wild. And this is just one that I printed off during the Arthurian literature class that I was taking, and so it's not a book, it's just I wanted to actually have a physical copy so I could refer back to it. But this is so just wild story, but it was really fun to read. It's about Arthur's cousin, one of Arthur's cousins type thing. Then I have another, this is where we get into my Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which I don't have very many, but I have Sir Gawain and the Green Knight translated by Burton Raffel, or Raffel maybe, I don't know. And I haven't read it yet, but I love Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and I will read this eventually. The next one I have is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, edited by James Winnie. I have read this one. This one I read for my Arthurian literature class that I was taking, and it's a good translation. It's a very simple, basic, straightforward translation, but it is a good translation. Not as, I feel like the Tolkien translation, which I personally don't own, my family does. I feel like the Tolkien translation better reflects and captures the world of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and the story being told, but it's more complex, a little bit more difficult to understand than the Winnie translation. Continuing on with Gawain, I have Gawain by J.P. Harker. This is one that is a YA or possibly new adult, probably YA, yeah, probably older YA for sure, story retelling of the Gawain in the Sir Gawain and the Green Knight tale, and it's the first book in an epic fantasy retelling of the Arthurian saga, and it starts with the story of Gawain, of a young Gawain, and his story, the retelling of that tale, and very enjoyable. Yeah, I would love to hear more people read this book and give me their thoughts on it, because I would love to hear more people's thoughts on it. I am still waiting for the next book. I need to reach out to J.P. Harker and see what the plan is with this. I think that he's working on one of his other series or something at the moment. But I'm excited to continue with that series whenever it comes out. Then I have The Lost Books of Merlin by Douglas Munro. I don't have any idea what this is, but it seems like a collection of tales regarding Merlin or something like that. No idea. Sounds good. Cheap again. Most of these books I have gotten from the used bookstore, $3.50, $4.50 or less, or half off, because that's where when I tend to go is when they have a big store-wide half off sale, and so I find these Arthurian books and buy them then because I like them, and I like to have Arthurian stuff. So eventually I will get to this and I'll read through this and see what it's about, but I'm interested to know because Druid magic from the age of Arthur, clearly it is Arthurian in some way, shape, or form. Continuing on, I have Mordred's Curse by Ian McDowell. This is one, again, I don't know anything about it. I got it at a different bookstore in Homer, Alaska, and I saw the cover. Obviously the cover is that classic fantasy cover art style that I absolutely love. Jacket art done by Doug Beekman. But I love the classic fantasy art style like this, and it just looks beautiful. But also, I'm intrigued by Mordred and what this Mordred's Curse is and everything like that. But then after reading, specifically after reading the Once and Future King, which I don't actually own, my brother owns it, but specifically after reading the Once and Future King, I bought this long before I read that, but I had been, what made me want to read this book even more, this is convoluted, my thoughts are convoluted, that's okay. What made me want to read this book even more was after reading The Once and Future King, the character of Mordred. I hate that character, despise the character, but it's so interesting. He's a fascinating character to look at, and I want to read more about him, and this happens to be the book that I own that's more about Mordred, so eventually I'll get to this one as well. Then we have Le Morte d'Arthur by Sir Thomas Malory. I have Volume 1 and Volume 2. This is the Penguin Classics edition, edited by Janet Cowan. Yeah, so this is one, again, that I had to read for my Arthurian literature class, but I'm glad that I did, because this is like the quintessential Arthurian canon almost. Malory took a whole bunch of tales from all over the place, including Chrétien de Troyes stories, or at least including the Lancelot story that she took, as well as things like the story of Tristan and Isolde, stuff like that, and pretty much not every other, but a whole bunch of other stories, and compiled them into one narrative of his own making, where he kind of rearranged some events, changed them slightly, to tell his own story with this, but it's fantastic, and it's a great overview of the entire Arthurian mythos, minus a few key stories here and there that are well known enough to not be needed to be in this specific book. But very, very good. Really loved reading. A little bit more difficult to read, but really good. And then the last one that I have is Tristan by Gottfried so Tristan by Gottfried von Strasbourg, and with Tristran of Thomas. So from what I remember and what I understand, this is a book that we had the majority of the manuscript, but the second half of it kind of thing was destroyed in fire, and so we don't have the second half of it. However, we have the second half of this Tristran of Thomas story, which seems to be the same cycle of this Arthurian tale, and as such, they were able to take the two halves of this story and put them together into a complete narrative. There's some discrepancies in them, but that's because they're by two different authors. But it seems to be the same story all the way through. And the story of Tristan and Isolde, while I'm not a fan of everything that happens in it, I've always liked the character of Tristan. And reading this one for my Arthurian class was super fun, and it's just, yeah, lots of great stuff in here as well. That is all of the books that I have, specifically Arthurian literature books. I will be getting more, undoubtedly. I'm sure I will continue adding to that collection because I love Arthurian literature. So maybe in several months or several years, who knows, I will come back and do a second updated list of an updated shelf tour, I guess is what it is. So that is my Arthurian literature shelf. Some of those books aren't on that shelf because they don't fit, or they're just massive, or I haven't put them on there because I haven't done a book haul where I've talked about the book, receiving the book yet. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap this up because this has gone on long enough. Thank you guys for watching an Erudite adventure. If anybody has any other video ideas that they'd like to request me to do, feel free to request them. I may or may not get them done right away or at all, but feel free to request them. It may be something like this one, like obviously I should do that one right away. That's a no-brainer for this channel. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and at the moment we're also posting Saturdays. We will see you guys again soon. Stay well.